Welcome back to Virginia This Morning. According to a recent poll conducted by Robert Half, it's projected 41% of workers plan to look for a job within the next 6 months, and the top reasons are salary boost, career advancement, and career change. Here to talk about this very timely topic is Lindo Gharib, District President at Robert Half, and we welcome you back to our live show.
Good morning. Glad to be back.
So this is some exciting research. I mean, you guys are covering a lot of topics here. What's the broad strokes? Let's start with the broad strokes, and then we'll go a little deeper into some of the research you've done.
Sure, absolutely. We were looking at really how do employees feel about the job market right now, and how optimistic are they currently? And really what we found, despite of what's going on in the world and all the talk of what's going to happen or may not happen from an economic perspective, employees feel very optimistic about what the job market looks like today. And that's just something that employers want to be cognizant of, because it is still very much a competitive marketplace right now in terms of finding good employees. And one of the things our statistics showed is there's a couple of different groups that are more likely to make the change. So again, employers want to be cognizant of that. We found that people that are 25 to 40 years old are more likely to want to make a change. Working parents are more likely to want to make a change. And those that have been with their companies for about 5 to 9 years are more than likely to want to make a change right now.
I think what's interesting on that last one is you think about retention, right? Everybody is trying to focus on retention. What are some of the things that you're seeing, that can kind of drive that? Can we stop the 5 to 9? Can we stop those people from leaving? What are you seeing from that area?
Yeah, retention is key right now. I mean, especially since it's so hard to find good talent. So really companies have to think about, what am I doing to keep my strong talent in place? And I tell people a couple of key items that they have to consider right now, right? Number one, above all else, is are they paying competitively, and are they offering strong benefits? As you mentioned just a second ago, the top reason people are looking to make a change right now is for higher pay, especially with inflation, especially with everything costing more. You got to make sure you're paying your people very, very well. In addition to that, companies today really have to think about, what does the employee experience look like, and what does it feel like in order to retain key people, right? So what are they doing from a onboarding perspective when they hire a new person? What are companies doing from a training and development perspective to keep their employees invigorated? And then what are employees doing in terms of giving back to their communities, supporting initiatives in inclusion, and in the world that we're in today as well, to help people stay connected, right? A lot of people are either working hybrid or remote still. So what are companies doing to help their employees stay connected to one another?
Absolutely. Now, Linda, you talked about, you mentioned a couple things, recession, interest rates, things like that. But you're saying in your survey that optimism, that people don't seem to be as worried about that in the job market. Like the idea that I want to go get more money or make more money in my job, I believe that's out. People believe that's out there, and they're going after that. Talk to us a little bit about why you think that confidence is still high, despite what some of the news says.
Sure. People are also attuned to what's happening from a job openings perspective, and we still, as a country, have record high job openings. There are over 11 million jobs open right now as we speak, right? So even if you look at the unemployed people, there are actually 2 jobs open for every unemployed person out there right now. So candidates, employees know that, and they see every day at their workplace that their employers are struggling to find good people, and there's a lot of unfilled positions. So that's actually giving them more confidence of, hey, I should put myself out there because there's still a lot of needs and you can't find the people for them.
Interesting. There's a term that I want to talk to you about before we wrap up. It's called quitter's remorse. Now, I was always taught to be wary of the grass is always greener on the other side. But quitter's remorse it's kind of a thing where, I take in a job, do I wish I could go back? You're saying that's not as big of an issue that you're seeing.
It's really not as big of an issue, right? We've heard some talk about it in the last couple of months, but in the survey, again, we polled those that left, and only 1 in 10 had remorse that they left their employer. I think what's happening today is really, as people think about making that change or making a move, they're really sitting down, they're making a list of what are the pros, what are the cons, and they're giving giving the appropriate thought prior to making that change.
Wow. Last thing I want to get to really quickly is this idea of an employer sharing their vision. A lot of people forgot about mission statements. They don't think about that. But people want to work at a place where they understand what the mission is, right? Tell us a little bit about that. We got about 30 seconds.
Sure. Absolutely critical in today's world, right? People want to feel like they're contributing to the overall mission, to a good cause, and that their work is really giving them a reward. So it's very, very important today that employers are talking with employees about that and also getting their input on those types of items.
Wow. This has been a great eye-opening experience for people, particularly thinking about going out there in the job market. Lindo, thank you for sharing this valuable information.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
If you're interested in learning more on this topic, just visit our show website by later today at virginiathismorning.com. Right now, I'm going to send it over to Andreas.